Chapter 110. The Song That Split the Heavens. The mountains were silent when it began. Even the winds that swept from the throat of the world seemed to hold their breath. The Greybeards, cloaked in the mists of their ancient monastery, had ceased their meditations. They knew the air had changed, its rhythm, its soul. High Hrothgar itself shuddered, and the eldest of them, Master Arngeir, whispered a prayer not to the Nine, but to the voice itself. Far below, in the pale blue hours before dawn, the Dragonborn stood upon the summit stone. His breath steamed in the cold, but his spirit burned like the heart of a forge. Around him, the air trembled as if the world strained to contain the power swelling within. Paarthurnax circled above, scales glinting silver beneath a frozen sky. The dragon's voice thundered through the mountainside. Dovahkiin, Zu'uni losni di las. You walk where gods themselves dare not tread. But the Dragonborn did not answer. His eyes were lifted toward the heavens, where the stars pulsed and wavered like ripples on a frozen lake. He felt the pull of Sovngarde, the song of warriors who feasted forever under Shor's hall. And he knew what he was about to do would tear that song apart. He drew in a breath deeper than any mortal had ever dared. The words of power, ancient, unspoken, forbidden, formed upon his tongue. They were not of this world. They were the breath between moments, the syllables of creation and undoing. Paarthurnax recoiled, knowing them for what they were. The echo of Akatosh's first roar, the sound that gave birth to time itself. When the Dragonborn spoke, the world cracked. Lok, Vokun, Kel! Light burst across the sky, searing white and crimson. The clouds split like parchment under fire. Below, rivers froze mid-flow, and forests bowed their crowns to the ground. From the far north came a sound like weeping thunder, the voice of the dead awoken too soon. The veil between realms shuddered, and through it bled the golden mists of Sovngarde. In Whiterun, Jarl Balgruuf fell to his knees as spectral warriors appeared upon the walls, staring west with hollow eyes. In Windhelm, Ulfric Stormcloak awoke screaming the name of his slain High King. The Greybeards wept silently, their tears freezing before they touched the stone. And in the void above all worlds, Akatosh turned his gaze upon Mundus. The Time Dragon saw what the mortal had done, had dared to shout against eternity, and his roar echoed across the spheres, shattering constellations. The Dragonborn collapsed upon the summit, blood steaming from his nose and mouth, his body trembling with the weight of what he had unleashed. The air was heavy with ash and divine anger. Paarthurnax landed beside him, wings folding like shrouds. So you have broken the sky song, Dovahkiin, the dragon said softly. Sovngarde bleeds. The dead walk where they should not. Even Shor will not forgive this. But the Dragonborn did not answer. His eyes were fixed upon the heavens, where the tear still burned, an open wound between realms. Through it faintly the halls of Sovngarde glimmered, vast, golden, trembling under a sky no longer whole. The song of the world had been rewritten, and the first note of the end had been sung. Chapter 2. The Rain of Souls. The storm began over the Sea of Ghosts. Sailors spoke of waves that glowed with pale fire, of winds that carried voices calling them home. By dawn, the storm had reached the coast, and Skyrim awoke beneath a rain of light. It was not water that fell, but memories. Wisps of silver drifted from the sky, forming the faint outlines of men and women long gone. Some bore spectral armor of ancient make. Others were peasants' children lovers, faces pulled from the long sleep of Sovngarde. They wandered through the mist, touching the earth as though rediscovering its weight. In Whiterun, a guard dropped his spear when his mother's ghost reached for his cheek. In the plains beyond, spectral mammoths roamed silently beside their long-buried herds. Across the land, Nord songs rose in trembling voices, half in joy, half in terror. At High Hrothgar, the Greybeards watched the storm from the steps. Arngeir bowed his head, his voice breaking with grief. He has torn the veil. The honored dead walk among us. And what of the dishonored? Whispered Einarth. But no one answered. In Windhelm, Ulfric Stormcloak stood upon the palace balcony, the rain glowing in his hands. Torrik, he whispered. The shape of the slain High King shimmered before him, spectral crown shining faintly. Yet the ghost's eyes were not forgiving. They burned with the cold fire of the beyond. Across Skyrim, the dead began to remember. Some wandered peacefully, their forms fading at dawn's touch. Others did not fade. The restless, those who had died with rage or regret, turned upon the living, seeing in them the warmth they had lost. Taverns became sanctuaries. Priests of Archay burned incense until their lungs ached, but the rites failed. The boundary of death no longer heeded their words. And through all this, the Dragonborn walked unseen, cloaked and hooded, traveling from village to village. He heard the whispers that followed him, some calling him savior, others curse. In the eyes of the people, he saw reflections of Sovngarde's light, dimming with every hour. On the seventh night, the sky cracked again, and from the rift above came a roar that shook the world. Alduin's shadow rippled across the clouds. Yet it was not the World Eater who emerged, but the echo of his passing, a host of dragon souls, freed from the currents of time. They circled the heavens like embers, seeking their master's hunger. Paarthurnax, upon his lonely peak, raised his head to the storm. "The balance falters," he murmured. "When gods sleep, mortals dream too loudly." And still, the rain of souls fell. Beneath its silver light, the living and the dead shared the same breath, while the world waited for dawn that might never come. Chapter the 3rd. The Thu'um, beneath the mountain. The winds of the north carried the scent of stone dust and ancient rot. By the time the Dragonborn reached the foothills of the Velothi range, even the snow seemed to fall in silence, as though wary of the ground it touched. He followed a path no map marked, an echo remembered only by dragons and ghosts. Paarthurnax had whispered of it once, the place where Sovngarde first kissed the mortal plain. At the base of the mountain stood a ruin so old that even the Dwemer had left it untouched. Its arches were half swallowed by ice, its pillars carved with runes that pulsed faintly when the Dragonborn approached. Across the gate was etched a phrase in the tongue of the voice, "Drem oke zi," peace to the spirit. But the words no longer held power. The air beyond them reeked of death unbound. He descended with torch in hand. Each step sank into centuries of dust and bones. The remnants of kings buried before Skyrim bore its name. The deeper he went, the louder the whispers became, soft, broken fragments of glory and regret. In that chorus, he recognized voices, ancient jarls, long-dead greybeards, even fragments of dragon tongues once slain by his own hand. At the heart of the ruin, he found the Thu'um, a vast stone sarcophagus sealed by runic chains, radiating light from within. The floor around it was cracked open, bleeding golden mist into the air, the very essence of Sovngarde leaking through the wound in the world. The Dragonborn knelt, touching the stone. It pulsed beneath his fingers like a heartbeat. A voice rose from within the tomb. "Do you seek to mend what you have broken, or to join what you have freed?" He drew his breath. "I seek the path to Sovngarde itself." The voice laughed, a hollow, regal sound that echoed through the cavern. "Then face those who earned their rest." From the shadows, figures stepped forth, ghostly kings wrapped in frostfire, their weapons forged of memory. He recognized Torrig among them, his crown gleaming faintly, eyes neither accusing nor forgiving. "Your Thu'um has slain the sky," said the fallen High King. "Why should you walk among the honored dead when even Shor weeps for what you've done?" The Dragonborn's answer was silence. He raised his blade. The clash that followed was not of steel but of will, the living against the dead, the mortal against the echo of his own legend. Each strike shattered whispers, each parry tore light from shadow. When at last the last spirit fell, the tomb's seal cracked open. From within came a blinding surge of gold. For a heartbeat, he saw Sovngarde itself, its fields dimmed, its mead halls shrouded in stormlight. The spirits within stared out through the wound, confused, longing, fading. And then it was gone. The Dragonborn stood alone, his torch guttering in the rising wind. Above him, through cracks in the mountain, he saw the auroras swirl in strange new colors, green turning to crimson, gold to void. The path was open now, but every step towards Sovngarde meant one further away from the world of the living. Chapter 4. The Feast of the Fallen. The Dragonborn crossed the threshold at dusk, stepping through the wound he himself had carved between worlds. The air that greeted him was thick with the scent of burning mead and old steel. Sovngarde, once golden and eternal, had become a land of twilight. The sky rippled like an open scar, and the auroras that once danced with the songs of heroes now bled red across the heavens. He walked through the misted plains where warriors once feasted under Shor's watchful gaze. The fields were filled still, but not with laughter. The fallen sat in silence around tables of stone, their goblets untouched, their eyes hollow. The Hall of Valor loomed in the distance, its roof cracked open to the void, spilling divine light that no longer warmed. At the head of the hall stood Kodlak Whitemane, his spectral form dimmed. "Shor's hall lies quiet, Dovahkiin," he said, his voice low, like wind through old fur. "You tore the sky, and with it, the heart of our rest. Even Sovngarde hungers now." Behind him countless souls gathered, heroes of the companions, jarls, kings, nameless warriors. Some looked upon the Dragonborn with reverence, others with hatred. From the far end of the hall the air shimmered, and a figure rose from the light. Ysgramor, the harbinger of all Nords, his beard glinting like frost. His hand rested on the hilt of his spectral axe. "Why have you come here, mortal, who defied Akatosh and unmade our peace? Do you seek to rule even in death?" The Dragonborn bowed his head. "I seek only to restore what I have broken." Ysgramor's eyes burned like twin moons. "Then restore it with your life." The hall erupted. Spirits roared, their fury shaking the foundations of the afterlife. But before the Dragonborn could draw his weapon, a tremor silenced all. From beyond the cracked roof, a shadow passed, a vast winged form circling in silence. Alduin, not reborn but remembered, his essence drawn from the rift, feeding upon the despair that filled the realm. "He feeds again," Kodlak whispered, "on souls unanchored." The Dragonborn stepped forward, his shout breaking the still air. "Fus ro da!" The voice struck through the hall, scattering tables and casting long-dead heroes into light. The dragon soul above turned, its burning eyes locking on him. Alduin's echo descended, wings of darkness splitting the mists. Yet this was not the devourer of time, but something far older, a hunger born from imbalance, shaped by the rift itself. The two forces met, voice against void. The hall itself trembled with the sound. When the light faded, Alduin's echo was gone. The mists cleared, and Sovngarde seemed to breathe again, though faintly, like an ember refusing to die. Ysgramor lowered his axe. "You have stilled the storm, but not the wound. Until it closes, none of us may rest." The Dragonborn looked up through the broken roof, where a sliver of mortal sky still glowed faintly. He knew what it meant. His body remained below, breathing, waiting. To seal the breach, he would have to return. But to do so, he would need to walk between the gods and the dead, and face the final voice that ruled both. Chapter 5. The Voice that Devours Time. The path back from Sovngarde was not a road but a wound, a spiraling fracture of light and shadow where the laws of life and death bent like molten steel. The Dragonborn walked through it alone, his armor flickering between solid form and ghostlight. The whispering of the dead followed him, growing fainter with every step, until even the songs of Shor's hall were lost to silence. He emerged upon the summit of the throat of the world once more, though it was no longer the mountain he had known. The sky above was torn, streaked with rivers of pale gold and black flame. Time itself seemed uncertain, as if Akatosh's wings no longer beat in rhythm with the world. Frozen moments drifted like shards of glass in the air, a bird in still flight, a droplet of water hanging eternally in descent, the faint echo of a thunderclap never completed. Paarthurnax waited, his scales dulled, his breath uneven. The dragon's eyes burned with a sadness that seemed older than the mountain itself. "You have walked where even Dove cannot fly," he said, "and you have brought back the silence of the gods." The Dragonborn nodded, his voice rough from the echoes of Sovngarde. "The hall is breaking. The dead can no longer sleep. Alduin's shadow feeds on the rift. If I cannot seal it, all of Nirn will be pulled into the same hunger. Paarthurnax lowered his head. Then you must speak the word that ends. The Dragonborn understood. There were words of power that shaped and words that destroyed. But there was one, whispered only in the oldest of draconic legends, the Calvin, the devouring voice, a Thu'um that consumes all time it touches. No mortal had ever dared to speak it, for it promised nothing but oblivion. He drew a deep breath, feeling the air crackle with the weight of eternity. The Greybeards, sensing what was about to unfold, fell to their knees upon the mountain steps far below. Arngir's trembling prayer rose with the wind. May Akatosh forgive this soul that shouts against time. The Dragonborn closed his eyes. He remembered Sovngarde's twilight, Ysgramor's warning, Kodlak's sorrow, the countless voices that now lingered in neither world. Then, with the might of his soul laid bare, he spoke. Karl, Ven, okay, the world screamed. The sky convulsed, folding in upon itself. The auroras shattered into rivers of pure sound. Mountains cracked, seas surged, and the stars themselves flickered like dying embers. In that instant, every heartbeat on Nirn paused, the breath of the world stolen by one man's voice. Paarthurnax reared back, roaring in defiance. Dovakin Zukren! But even the dragon's cry was devoured, drawn into the roaring silence that followed. And then, stillness. When the air returned, the rift above Sovngarde had vanished. The sky mended itself in trembling light. Time began again, fragile but alive. The Dragonborn knelt, his armor blackened by the force of the shout. Paarthurnax lowered his head beside him, silent in mourning. The wound in the world was closed, but so too was the voice that had sung it open. Only the wind carried his name now, whispered from mountaintop to vale, from temple to tomb, the song of the mortal who had shouted against time and won. Chapter 6. The Last Dawn over Whiterun. When morning came, it did not rise in gold, but in grey. The world had survived the devouring voice, yet it bore the marks of its passing. Rivers ran still for a heartbeat too long, shadows lingered where none should be, and even the sun seemed hesitant to climb. From the steps of Dragon's Reach, the people of Whiterun watched the horizon. They had not seen their Jarl in days. The city was quiet, the air heavy with reverence and fear. And then, as the dawn's edge broke over the plains, a figure appeared upon the Skyforge, cloaked, scarred, and haloed by the pale fire of the gods. The Dragonborn had returned. His eyes no longer glowed with the light of battle, nor with the pride of victory. They were hollow, reflective, as if seeing two worlds at once. Behind him, a faint shimmer hung in the air like the ghost of the rift he had sealed. The winds whispered around him, carrying traces of voices not his own. The Greybeards' chants, Paarthurnax's solemn farewell, the echo of countless souls finally at rest. Yorland Greymane approached with hesitant steps. "We thought you gone, Dovahkiin." The Dragonborn turned slowly, his voice softer than the wind. "Perhaps I am." He looked out toward the fields where Sovngarde's light had once bled through. There was peace there now. Quiet farms, unbroken sky, the faint laughter of children unafraid. Yet in that stillness lay a cost. The voice within him, the song that had once bent dragons and gods alike, was gone. Where once there was thunder, now there was only breath. He climbed the steps of Dragon's Reach, standing where once he had shouted down a dragon. Balgruuf waited at the summit, older, wearier, but his eyes still sharp. "You sealed the wound and the world still stands," said the Jarl. "But tell me, hero, what did it cost you?" The Dragonborn looked toward the east. "Everything that made me more than mortal, everything that made me less." A long silence fell. Below them, the people began to sing. Not the war songs of the Nords, but a gentler tune, an old harvest hymn reborn as a prayer for dawn. The sound carried across the plains, weaving through the empty air where once the voice had ruled. The Dragonborn smiled faintly. He turned his gaze skyward one last time, toward the peaks where the Greybeards knelt in eternal meditation, toward the horizon where Paarthurnax's ashes drifted with the wind, towards Sovngarde, now distant and whole. "Time flows again," he whispered. "Let it flow without me." And with that, the light around him brightened. Not the harsh glare of power, but the soft radiance of release. When it faded, only his cloak remained upon the stone. The wind carried it down to the plains, fluttering between the banners of Whiterun before vanishing into the morning. Above, the sun finally rose, whole, unbroken, golden once more. The first true dawn since Sovngarde fell. And somewhere beyond all mortal knowing, Shor's hall sang again,